All right, week 5. Really, I know instructors probably say this a lot, so apologize for overusing it, but it's a really important week in our class. We go into the same amount of work that we're already doing, and we're adding on top of it a really important part, which I've been talking about since the beginning of the semester, which is the Develop at 1. So in this video, what I'm going to do is go over what I did for Develop at 1 so far. I have a little more work to do with it, but I'm very close with it. And then I want to, and this is part of the theme you're going to hear this week, I attempted to be more interactive with everyone in both the attendance posts and in the Learn Together this week because I felt like I needed to. I definitely wanted to give you my feedback. So for those of you, and there is definitely a group of you who are working ahead of the due date. And I really try to encourage that. So I need to make sure I'm doing that. And so if you noticed, I was much more active if you were submitting, maybe by noon yesterday. And that's the other thing, right? Is thinking about if you want my feedback on your code, then submit it enough at least 24 hours ahead of time so I can give you that. And the only person I didn't do that for was Jared. Jared's code is so awesome, right? It's like, and here's the other thing about this is that being able to look and read other people's code is such an important part of this class because it's like, we've been told this since we were young, like the ability to read makes you a better writer. Well, the ability to read and understand somebody else's code will make you a better coder. And so I'm giving examples of the code that I've written as a way to give you a guideline. And if you aren't reading that, if you aren't looking at that code first, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit. Or if you aren't also using that as a way to say, what questions might I have? There's many different ways you could consume that, right? But the sooner you take a look, the sooner, the better. Now, this theme is going to be carried through because with the Develop at 1, which if you look over at this calendar, is a week from today at midnight, this is continuing this theme. Some of you, I think I've had 4 of you the last time I looked, signed up already for code reviews. So here's the deal, and I hope you understood this, and if not, I'm going to say it again. The benefit of talking to me and if you don't have code complete, then you're coming to me to have a discussion about your code. That's not really the code review, but I highly encourage it. But the nice thing about either way, whether you're coming to me to do a code review or you're coming to me to discuss code, right, that gives you more time to correct or write code for the due date. So here's my encouragement. I actually thought about moving this due date from the 13th, because that's a Friday night, to the following maybe Sunday night or Monday morning. And then I thought, the reason is I looked at next week, week 6, and our section 7 is almost a 3-hour section. And way important too. Some of the most important concepts you're going to cover. So and if you're watching the video and understanding this, this is going to benefit you. If you come see me next week for either a discussion or a code review, I'm going to extend your due date until Monday, that following Monday, right? So this is the 13th. We normally have a due date for our regular items, right, on that Monday, but that Monday morning, I'm going to allow you to turn in your code without points removed for late. So now what that says to you, unfortunately, and you may hear this is, I can turn in late code. Sure you can. You can turn in late work. You're just going to get a discount on it. But those of you who come see me, you won't get that if you want to have that weekend to work on it. So it's my encouragement, right, for you to do it, because my concern is if I just say, okay, everyone can do it, I get it, right? So it's like, sometimes a due date is just that thing that I don't work on it until that due date. With this class, that probably doesn't work to your advantage, but I can't keep you from doing it. So I'm going to give you an incentive. So let me just review for a second because I did add something not as a new requirement, but as a clarification requirement. And that was, you need to do some kind of looping through your array or object of data, right? This is newly added, but really this was what I was assuming, and it was good that I reviewed it, right? And here's the link for you to actually go and sign up for the review sessions, okay, that are available. Again, the sooner you reach out to me with you need something different outside of that, the better. So I'm going to show you something. And first, in my reply, I'm also going to give you, and this is, actually, no, let's stay on the vein and then I'll come back to that. Let me show you in my environment. One thing, right? So in your private, you should be setting up your dev, and then you should be setting up a directory called dev1. And then under here would be your code. Okay, so here's the code that I've written. And this code, and this is why I've been harping upon this idea, and the more work you've done in the Learn Togethers, the better this next week will be for you. So the one thing I had mentioned on this was that you get 25% of this comes from implementing at least 3 new object or array methods or other JS functionality. So I actually have an example of one array method and one JS functionality. Now it's not big, but that's kind of the idea, right? So I wanted to show you it doesn't have to be big. So on mine, I created a couple of new functions. One was get last game played, where in this case, right, what I'm doing, let me scroll up a little more, as I'm actually just looking at my now this may be news to you if you haven't looked at week 5, because I've already released the Learn Together where I went over my code changes. But I did a pop. Now pop is not new because actually Andrew showed this, the idea of it takes the last entry in the array. So that's not new. But what I did is I wanted to be able to say which player was this, because in my detail I was capturing player ID and I wanted to be able to reach back and get the actual player name. Okay, so what I did is I recreated the string of the actual name of the object. So player underscore, and then the last dot player, which is this entry, because I have an object I have an array of objects. So I recreated that, but then I had to do a little research about how I could actually use that string now as a way to have it say, no, this is really an object reference. And so I found something called eval. So eval allowed me to, once I constructed that string, is to use that as a way to say this is actually an array reference. Okay, so that was fun. And it gave me the ability to give some meaningful output here about the last game played. My next example is probably a little more involved, and it's count choice. So what I decided to do was count the number of times either the player or the game chose rock. And so to do this, I used, so we have learned in this course filter, right? But it's really part of map, reduce, filter. These 3 are higher order functions. And I used reduce to go through each of my detail. And I had to do some logic to figure out if either the player or the game chose whatever I'm passing in, increase my accumulator. But I also had to account for the fact that they could have, like the player could have chosen rock and it counted 1. But what if they both chose rock? Then I had to do another logic, another if statement for that. So what this did, though, is it reduced that down to where it told me just the number of occurrences, the count that came back. So it's not that different, but it's not something he really went over. Well, he didn't go over reduce, but I like the idea of using it, right? So again, so I would really only need one other thing here. Okay, so that makes sense? So I've gone over 2 examples of how I implemented 2 different, and in this case, a method, reduce, and JS functionality evaluate. It didn't have to be a large thing, so I just need to do one more. So, but what happened was, what took up some of my time, I was going to do that, was that there was a discussion in attendance last week about some of you, and in this case, I don't think Eric would mind. I said Eric wanted some maybe simpler examples. So what I did is I ended up, and I gave you all the link, but I want you to know that in my playground, I've actually now, and I need to do one more for this week 4 coming in, and actually these should not be weeks. And you didn't have to. I didn't require you to rename it. And definitely we could have used version control. I just found it a little easier to point to each week to do this. But in this case, I ended up doing, instead of rock, scissors, paper, because a couple of comments too were that they felt like because my examples covered a game that they needed to. And that's so not the truth. There are definitely examples other students have done where they have done other things, not games. So in this case, I decided to track workouts, right? So, and this is how I've done it, right? So again, you can look at this code. I do need to document this code, but the idea is that this gives you, again, learn to read other folks' code, what it's doing, right? So I'm actually adding to personal data. I pass it an object. I pass it an activity type and a duration. Right. So, and then I have in this case, and again, for the final project, not again, but just to clarify, for the final project, you can use object methods if you want. You can also just go back to regular functions. It's really your choice. I chose to go back to regular functions because I felt like using object methods is just a little too wordy for my style. But I'm not, it's fine. Whichever, if you really got, like, you understood, you like the concept, you like how it worked in your code, then use them. But in this case, I did just some simple logic that based on the type of activity, I did a multiplier based on the duration to come up with calories. And then I actually added, because I had some starting data. And this is the idea of, like, you're simulating user input, right? So user input, right? So here's the example of, because I use an app for this. I use an app for all my workouts and all my daily activities. But what I love about it is it gives me great data. But the idea is simulating the user input that has some data about that object or whatever you have set up. And then through my code, I'm actually simulating the idea of updating, processing that user input, and then having some output, right? And again, this is a pretty simple example, I think. But if you're reading this and you're not understanding what I'm doing here, great time to ask me. And these, again, I've had a couple of you reach out to me. We've done sessions, and I've offered this up for you because I understand that for some of you without any coding experience, this is more of a challenge. And even some of you that have, I'm actually saying, I want you to code in this style. And that can be a challenge. So, I'm available. So if you're like, well, you wouldn't be available when I need you, well, you haven't asked me. Okay, because if it's 10 o'clock at night, yeah, maybe not. But if it's 7 and I can do it, I will. So what's my point about this? Reach out and ask for help if you need it. Now's the time. Okay, so you have a link to my playground for you to check out. And I've shown you, right, and I will get the last one done where I'm actually going to implement arrays for this week, and you're going to learn arrays. Okay. All right, so I think I went over everything. Oh, drop date. Yeah, so again, I'm not going to recommend this, but I want you to know because it's important. The date to drop this class, and if you don't do it before, if you wait after, you have to get a grade. So next Wednesday, by the end of the day, by the end of the campus day, you have to have dropped this class or you're going to get a grade in this class. So it's the final drop date. But again, if you're struggling, I hope to be talking to you, right? I would really like to see everyone that's here right now hang out But I get, and I've talked to a couple of you, that this class is one of many things that you're doing, and it's just a struggle to try to keep up with everything, and I get that too, right? So we are planning this class to be running again next semester. I'd like to re-talk to them about the format, but I'm not sure based on the timeline it'll happen. You know, we'll talk about that towards the end of the class. So anyway, 15-minute video. Hopefully you got all that. Here's my parting kind of question, but you can comment about any of this. Is there anything you would like to see me go over in a video form? And the sooner you tell me, the more likely I'm going to get it done, related to either my code or the concepts that I'm asked or the things required for Develop It 1. Right? So today I went over just the directory setup. I went over the code that I wrote that represented that extra 25%. Okay. But if there's any other questions or, if there's clarification, ask me. I'd be happy to create videos for that. But those are also good candidates for you to come talk to me as well. But I'm open to either. So DevFest is the 21st. Ask me. I gave you a code for that last week. Ask me any other questions about that. It's going to be some good sessions. There is a hackathon for that. $500 for a 24-hour hackathon if you feel like you have the desire to put something together pretty quickly. Under Valley DevFest, there is a section now for the hackathon and the way that's going to run. So you can check that out here. If you want to know about that, anything else, let me know. Okay? Have a great, great weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Peace out.